Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guests are from an upcoming one-man show at the James Theater in Iowa City from Crooked Path Productions. Mark Dotson, who is the subject and writer of the show. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. And
Ron Clark, familiar presence here in the Culture Crawl, and you're directing this.
Yeah, directing and sculpting and just being a good collaborator as best Jody and I can be. We're both working on it.
The production. You have the sound too.
Yeah, we're doing a little sound design.
The production is called Undoing Time, and Mark, this is a very personal story for you. It's writings and monologues that you created while you were incarcerated.
Yes, sir. It was about 22 years ago, actually, in 2001, when the first seeds of my ideas started coming together. It started out as a concept, and then as I started adding context to the concept, I just realized I had a very powerful tool that was also very therapeutic through a lot of really tough situations where I was able to say, you know what, my art has the ability to expose and to make right things that I see are wrong, rather than just being a victim to the situation. I had the ability I was empowered by my art. So there were a lot of really tough times where I was dealing with situations with guards or just whatever the bureaucracy was throwing at me that day, but I was able to say, you know what, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to document this. Because it's just not, it just can't be left this way. They can't just say that this is the final say and you're not allowed to, speak your truth. And that's what really frustrates you in there. And to be able to have that voice, even though it may be 22 years before that voice is heard, it's still, it got me through a lot of things.
If you don't mind, tell me a little bit about your life leading up to being incarcerated.
Well, I came from a upper middle class family. My dad, he was a head electrician at the power plant that supplies all electricity to the Dallas area, and of course, having been a product of divorce, I had the whole ordeal of bouncing back and forth between parents. And just somewhere along the way, I guess being, subjected to things that I might not have been subjected to if I had a more solid house to be raised in, maybe things wouldn't have gone the way they had gone. But, being at the times that it was and everything and where we were, I can't really fault my parents for a lot. It's really on me, and taking ownership of those things, especially as an adult, makes a big difference. When you finally decide, okay, I can sit here and I can say this is the reason or this is the reason, and I can use that as an excuse to be a worse version of myself. And as a young, immature person that doesn't have the tools you need to deal with, traumatic events, it's kind of the path that usually happens most of the time. A young person becomes a worse version because, it just the anger and the confusion But as you mature, and as I matured and realized what was important in life, I decided that I wasn't going to use that as an opportunity to be a worse version of myself. This is a moment to be a better version of myself, to overcome things. There was a transition point where I guess I grew up. There was a lot of points of reference that I go back to that have made me who I am.
And those are the stories that we've worked with Mark to sort of bring together to find the essential elements And we've put these into a format now of about a 1 hour show. So each performance will be just under an hour, and there will be a talk back immediately following each performance. So the audience, because as I'm sure you're feeling, Dennis, this raises a lot of questions for those of us who have been blessed enough not to be caught up in the incarceration system. And so we're hoping that a lot of folks will come out and listen intently and see Mark's great artwork, which is stunning and exciting, and hear these stories.
Yeah, these are monologues that you're going to be presenting, but you're also a visual artist.
Yes, sir. Graphic artist, and recently I switched over to oils. But while in prison, I did 23 pieces, and I used the same methods that we would use in prison to basically make cards for our family. Just using colored pencils and tag board, and instead of making a small card, I made a large picture. Is what it all came down to.
At what point during your incarceration did you realize that this was going to be your outlet? I mean, we know the cliches, we know the lifting weights, we know all the things that you see in the movies and TV shows. But at what point did you decide that you needed to use art to express yourself?
Well, during that 2001 to 2005 stint in Wisconsin, actually it was even earlier than that. It was actually 99 to 2005. They had me locked down 23 hours a day. It was what was called warehousing. You didn't have to do anything wrong. They would just lock you down, and there you were. And they actually had me in the same prison where Jeffrey Dahmer had been. And like I said, I started out with a concept where I was playing solitaire and I was going to use the numbers of the score as pixels to create images with. So when I started trying to come up with these images, at first it was just a run-of-the-mill, mundane prison art of walls and bars and stuff like that. But that never was good enough for me, and I just felt like, God, I'm not gonna be that just the same old thing, making the same statement that everybody else makes. It has to be something different, or what am I doing this for? And it just came to me. Actually, it came to me when I was sitting there thinking about a person that had been wronged, and it had bothered me for a long time. And I didn't even realize that how much it really tormented me. But here I was laying there, going through the scenario of what this person went through, and feeling this pain and this feeling in my heart of injustice and just the sadness of what is the world anyway. It's a disillusionment that you deal with when you see that it doesn't matter. You can be a victim of your government.
And so the thing that's really exciting about Mark's art is that it has such variety and such range, because some of the stuff is dark. We're going to have a lobby display as well of some of Mark's pieces hanging out there, and some of the pieces are actually going to be projected within the show itself. But these stories range from some pretty dark things to some very there's a dog in the show. The story of McGregor, that was a trainee of Mark's that lived with Mark for a year when he was doing time at Fort Dodge. I mean, there's all kinds of stories, and they show, I think, a real range of human experience that most of us never have to experience ourselves and never get to see behind the bars, because what we've been fed, as you mentioned, Dennis, is what we see on TV and movies, and that's pretty tepid compared to the reality.
Mark, at what point, so you started off as a visual artist, but eventually you decided that you needed to also be telling stories to go along with this. What was when did that come about?
Yeah, that was the moment that I'm describing, is when I was imagining or remembering that moment when this friend was tormented. It dawned on me that I can tell that story. That what happened to him does not have to go to the heaps of time. He can have some sort of vindication, and I can do that with my art. And that moment, from that moment on, it was a game changer for me in many ways. I don't even know if I would have survived that time if it hadn't have been for that.
And so we started with this notebook of stories, stuff that Mark had journaled, and that's where the story started. And Jody has been a tremendous editor, and put everything into a formal script as we developed and workshopped. We've been workshopping this piece for about 2 years. Yeah,
in reality, the stories were alive all along, or as they created themselves. But they would be stories, that I would tell amongst friends, just to keep them fresh and to remember them and keep them alive. But when I actually put them on paper and they started fleshing out, I was just putting the words that I've been saying for years on the paper. And once I was done and was able to look back at it, I saw it's like, man, this is pretty special. I'm well read, academically with, the English language from, working in the Braille shop. I got a pretty good grasp on that, and plus writing letters for years and years and years and years. And it came very natural for the thoughts in my head to come out onto the paper. And like I said, when I actually did put it on paper, it was even an eye-opening moment for me. I was actually in Fort Dodge during COVID when I was writing these descriptions of each piece. And I would get done with one, and I'd hand it to my cellie. And when I'd get done, he'd get done reading it. He'd look up at me, and he'd just be like, my God, I can't, he was just blown away. And every time I would let people read the things, I would see the emotion and how it would affect people. And like I said, from years and years of reading and just being familiar with literature and everything, I'd never seen any work, affect people like that so thoroughly. Like when they hand me the thing back, they're shaking, and I just never seen any work that's done that to me or done that to anybody else. So it's just been kind of like a revealing path.
This new piece is part of Crooked Path Theater, which is Chris Okishii and Patrick Delaney's theater group that longtime friends of yours.
Right.
How did you all get hooked up together?
Well, we've been working with Mark for a couple of years. That was another story that I won't go into right now, but a mutual friend brought us together, and we started working with Mark on the stories and have been meeting weekly for a couple of years. And then Patrick and I were having a nice conversation about what we were up to, the projects we were working on, and he said, "Oh, I want to hear these stories." So we did a workshop reading, and Patrick and Chris came to hear it and immediately said, "Oh, we definitely want to produce this." So Crooked Path Theater is the producing body. These guys are doing like 6 projects a year now. They're incredibly busy, incredibly good producers, bringing different kinds of art into our community. And as you're hearing, these stories are a real insight into the human condition that is too often not heard. So it's been a good project.
Mark, what has it been like for you to take these stories, and now as you've gotten to know Ron and Jody and Chris and Patrick, and kind of come to understand the level of talent that you've got yourself involved with? What's that like to see them working with you on your stories?
Luckily, I think I've been conditioned somewhat. Like I expressed to Ron and Jody when I first met them, I try to get to know people organically, and I don't know if I had to take them in completely all at once. Might have ran like, you know what. But yeah, it's over time as I get to know Ron and Jody and Chris and Patrick and everything, it's very surreal when I stop and reflect on it. But I just try to keep my head down and act like it's no big deal.
What's the one thing, Mark, that you've learned that's new through taking your writings through this process?
I think one of the biggest things that we had to deal with was just my inability to know what is pertinent and what isn't, like terminology and stuff, prison terminology. I would just, go through some scenario where I'm saying, well, this happened, and and the guy, he picked up this and that, and they're like, what was all of that? What was all that?
Wait, what's a screw? Wait, what is that? Oh, it's a guard. I mean,
he picked up a sticker. Did he stick it on something? No, that's where you stick somebody.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of times where they had to stop me and say, wait a minute. We're not following it at all.
Ron, same question. What's the one thing that you've learned from this process?
On a profound level, my heart has been expanded and opened, because the men and women behind bars are the most easily forgotten in our culture. I've long tried to be the kind of person that is empathetic and expand my world beyond my immediate surroundings, and what is comfortable in my nice suburban home. And spending time with Mark, hearing these stories about a system that is not designed to make people better, This man went into the system when he was 21 for nonviolent crimes and was turned into a criminal. And I say that without hesitation. And I don't know if Mark has the same perspective, but surely from my point of view, I have come to understand that our incarceration system is foul and it doesn't work and it needs to be changed.
Part of what drives me is the times that I would see news crews and stuff come into whatever prison I was at doing a documentary or whatever, and it was always the same. They just wanted to portray us as these heartless, cold thugs that deserve whatever happens to us. And they didn't ever want to talk to me or any of my friends who actually had something intelligent to say, and that was very frustrating to know that we're basically forgotten. We're just, we're just getting swept under the rug because that's the easy thing to do. So part of what I wanted to make sure I did, is let people know that not everybody in there is, first of all, guilty. There's a lot of innocent people in there, a lot of overcharged people, a lot of people with mental illnesses that should not be there. And there's just a lot of people who made mistakes. And they're sorry about it, and they're doing their best to try to redeem themselves and become a part of society again.
Mark Dotson's one-man show is entitled Undoing Time. It'll be at the James Theater, March 24th through the 26th. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So Friday and Saturday shows at 7:30, Sunday matinee at 2, it looks like, yeah. You can get tickets at thejamesic.com. And I just want to thank you both for being here. Mark, thank you for being, being willing to come and, and tell these stories, not just to tell them in a public way, but also to, work with Ron and Jody and Patrick and Chris to tell them in such a way that I think will make them even more impactful.
And hopefully, maybe somebody else can avoid going down the same path I've been down. I've been down all the bad paths, so I can tell people how to avoid them if they want to listen.
And now we're walking in the light.
That's right.
That's right.
Now it's a good path.
Yes,
well,
sir.
Great to meet you, Mark. Thanks
Great
so much for being here today, and I hope it really goes well.
Thank you.
Again, thejamesic.com for tickets to Undoing Time. You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio many weekdays at 10:30, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture, or using your favorite podcast player. I'm Dennis Green, and I'll talk to you later.